Welcome to another edition of the Civ Battle Royale. My name is Dawkinzz, and let's get right into part 106. Oni wa Soto, Fuku wa Uchi. Konnichiwa, Iran Karapate, and Afchomar Chomakia, everyone. Welcome to part 106 of the Civ Battle Royale. I'm user Homosubi, creator of Civ 5's Rising Sun mod, and soon Civ 6 Sengoku Monogatari, because one in Japan is never enough, representative of Japan in the current iteration of the Civ Rap Battle Royale, and generally the sub's resident second Dan Weeaboo. Oh boy, it's not me. It's not me, I'm not the weeb, please. For this week's OC feature, I've highlighted user Pizzakato's Hawaii Ghost Ball, the only one of this three which did not make it to the power rankings, despite being a work of art in itself. I miss Hawaii, but on the other hand, at least it stopped them from being ranked last. And Crowfoot coming in with the 420 no scope, what up? This map from user Spherical Melon is, by and large, the same as that of the last part, with the obvious exception of the demise of not one, not two, but three civs, unless you count the Kimberly underwater Ronin as having a chance of sniping a city somewhere. The Inuit are slowly unpuppeting cities near their heartland, including Laredo, while Brazil has started to bypass their Raj and Agra. The Boers do not seem to be unpuppeting anywhere. Also, not much has changed on Der Erlingkönig's tile-accurate map, other than that the collapse of the rump states is swift and brutal. A slightly smaller Sweden features, as does a slightly larger Mongolia, but apart from that, I'm struggling to see any changes here at all. We start this part with a shot from the one significant war that was ongoing at the end of part 105, namely Sibir versus Mongolia. I'm not really sure what to make of this war lore-wise. It sounds like a classic steep Khan versus Khan conflict, but on the other hand, it's being fought with biotroopers on one side and giant death robots and hover tanks on the other side. Welcome to the CBR, I guess. Oh, and also there's a whole bunch of Brazilians everywhere, so go figure. Anyway, looking at the slide in particular, we see that Ulaanbaatar has fallen to Sibir. Good news for Sibir fans, bad news for those who love a good bit of border gore. As for the general balance of the war, it is hard to tell from this slide, as it appears that Sibir has the advantage despite the Brazilian carpet, thanks to much more advanced units. It is also notable that every Sibir city I can see has a military unit in it, implying they have actually started to produce units. Good ones too. However, we're still not sure how the Mongol carpet is holding up. And hang on a minute. Look at those diplomatic notices. The Blackfoot have made peace with Sweden. Forgot they were even at war. I didn't. I dare say more people in those countries properly forgot they were at war as well and have done something else. Blackfoot versus the Bucks, you say? Did anyone see this coming? It is, in some ways, a war that we have been waiting for some time. I distinctly remember people advising the Bucks to eat the Blackfoot to stay relevant, and more recently, the other way around. However, it is hard to work out what exactly is going to happen. Both sides have a strong carpet, the Blackfoot's extending across a larger swathe of territory, while the Bucks sport biotroopers. There are other points to be made on both sides. Henry Morgan's penchant for nukes could come into play with this carpet, as could Blackfoot paratroopers. Interestingly enough, neither side has a decent navy, although both sides of the sea are carpeted. Almost everything is either an embarked land unit or a carrier, with Morgan appearing more vulnerable to big carrier lobbyists than Crowfoot. Perhaps there's some sort of deal going on involving a big carrier-owned rum distillery. Okay, so this just got ridiculous. I thought this would be a fairly unassuming part after the madness of the last part, but it appears as if I was very much mistaken. Well, it's not as if I mind, far from it, but anyway, it's Boers versus Iceland, which looks kinda scary and would be downright terrifying were it not for the Brazilian peacekeepers keeping the Boers trapped in the Mediterranean and Ingelfer's African holdings protected. Speaking of Brazil, look at that brand new carpet, and more importantly, look at all those aeroplanes. If Pedro declared on Kruger now, he'd have a pretty much every advantage in the book, unlike in the closing stages of the OCP2, when Kruger had air superiority. The Boers do seem to have a few military units, although the sea is undisputably Inglefur's, and he looks ready to rain down hell on the Boer Maghreb from above. Let's hope he pieces out early, I guess. I'm not sure how or why Inglefur got a biotrooper down to Aswan and took the city, but he has, and there's now a gray and green enclave in what used to be a solidly orange territory. The only good news for Boer fans, if indeed they exist and are not just using that flair to be provocative, is that, like Sibir in the first slide, every Boer city here has a unit stationed in it, implying that the Boers too have started producing units again. Looks like Lunar's bug fix has started to take effect, or alternatively, looks like someone in Pretoria called tech support, turned Kruger off and on again, blew into the cartridge, and spurred the Boer war machine back into action. Another shot of Aswan, already filling up with Brazilians, and of the North Central Reich. Looks like I might have been wrong on the last slide. I can't see this area of the map producing an orange carpet anytime soon, although about half of the cities here do have a military unit in them. Mostly biotroopers, but no planes. Has Kruger gone complacent again? Okay, it's time to address the twin elephants in the room here. Let's call them the Asian elephant in the room and the Latin American elephant in the room. Whatever, let's say it's a zoo elephant just to keep this already rather strained metaphor going. Inuit versus Brazil. What is perhaps most surprising here is that Ekanik has declared war on Pedro rather than the other way around. In other words, Ekanik has woken up. Finally! If I were you, I'd mind your head as airborne swine may start to appear across the new world. Again, I'm not sure what's going to happen here. Brazil clearly has a larger army, but the Inuits seem to have the naval dominance in this part of the ocean. And now to the Asian elephant in the room. Parks has also woken up, and it looks like Korea, or at least the space they currently occupy, may just be about to start being relevant. It appears as if neither side has a strong military presence close to the front, although Straya has air superiority. Unlike the Blackfoot versus the Bucks, however, the natural border of this war is not the existing border. It's further south, as there is little to no space for Aussie units to hang around in Japan waiting for Koreans to take cities so they can flip them back. Here we have a shot of the undisputed greatest archipelago on the cylinder just before it starts to explode. It appears as if most of the fighting here will be naval, as not only are there several 1- or 2-tile islands, the new Blackfoot overflow carpet has extended to both Korean-controlled North Japan, the DPRJ, and the Strayan-ruled South Japan, the ROJ. Probably best to mentally have the Korean naval carpet in your head, as Big Carrier is a big player in these waters as well as those around the Caribbean. Oh, and both warring civs have a military unit in most of their cities. Also note the Boer carriers. Suspicious or what? We return to North Africa to find that Inglefur is actually winning. Ciudad del Carmen has fallen and Basseterre Amer looks to follow. Admittedly, Kruger will probably flip Carmen back. Where the hell did all those units come from? But at least this shows that the war will probably not be completely one-sided. We also see a major Boer airbase in Cathargo Nova. Okay, Kruger definitely has the advantage here, but it shows how far the Boer have fallen that was ever in doubt. Seriously, the Boers have somewhat septupled the amount of units in this part of the map in the space of one turn. Aswan looks set to return to Orange control, but Alexandria is still contested. Genghis has made a breakthrough and taken Shenzhen, with Barnaul set to follow. However, if you look closer, the Mongol carpet is gradually thinning out, while Sibir, especially in the south of this screenshotted area, has started to churn out biotroopers. I doubt Genghis will have the advantage for much longer. Shame. I kinda like Genghis. First blood goes to Sejong. Ilo Ilo, which had 10 Strayan planes stationed on it in the last screenshot, has gone blue, and although there are green units in the area, it seems likely that it will take a few more turns before Parks is able to take it back, which, to be honest, he probably will. Ilo Ilo appears to be on the island known as Sphereland as Okinawa, which has suffered a spate of military plane crashes in the last few months. Kinda ironic, really. It appears as if Sejong has effectively done the same thing by taking out Parks' air force here. However, Parks still has a crazy number of planes in this screenshot. The Blackfoot have made a rather precarious beachhead on the Yucatan, kind of threatening Maracaibo, but kind of not. while both carpets remain fairly intact. Of greater note here is the Tharapne, which has been reduced to 0 health by the Brazilians and looks set to fall. Looks like Pedro has got angry over losing Laredo all those parts ago. Kruger has a healthy scattering of units across North Africa as his war machine gets going once more. Carthage and Olympia would both be near as damn it orange if it weren't for the Brazilians in the way. I can see a pattern beginning to emerge, and the attack on Alexandria has faltered. Come on, Unglefur, you can do it! Do it for the sake of underdogs everywhere. I know that didn't stop you from thrashing Ireland, but you know what I mean. Beryazovo, once home to the infamous Trigger Darkhan, falls to Sibir, and the Mongol carpet thins out even further. I guess this might explain why the Civ Rap Battle Royale recently saw a masterful takedown of Brazil by Sibir. Nagoya falls to Korea, sandwiching the ROJ between two pieces of DPRJ territory. Remembering Sejong's faithful protection of Emperor Meiji, Nagoyoans wildly celebrate the possible end of thousands of years of suffering, the only way they know how. Prawn tempura onigiri, that's it. Yeah, don't ask me why. It's a Nagoya thing. Incidentally, it appears as if Iloilo has flipped, Sejong has found an air force in Nagoya, and Gladstone Air Base has been evacuated. Despite my previous predictions, Tharapne hasn't fallen yet, seemingly due to Brazil's range units blocking its melee units from taking the city. However, it may be too late, as an Inuit naval convoy is rounding the coast of their Mexican dominions, and there's not a useless carrier in sight. What do you call a White Walker Navy anyway? White swimmers? Doesn't sound very scary, does it? That's because it's known as the Ice Sheet Fleet. It appears as if Maracaibo, as half expected, has flipped, and Crowfoot has managed to land one extra paratrooper on the Yucatan. But apart from that, there's not much to see here. The Blackfoot are bombing Petit Goave, rather strangely in fact, as it is pretty much the only place in North America without any Blackfoot units already in it. As for the state of the war itself, it seems pretty similar to when it started. Neither side will be able to encroach on the other's lands without a great deal of effort, perhaps disappointingly to those who want a third force in the New World to rival Brazil and the Inuit. But it will be the Blackfoot. I mean, they're holding their own against a Civ that is, 10 techs ahead of them? Let's see how this progresses. Nagoya holds and Gladstone has fallen, putting the EU4 players' pilgrimage site of Ryukyu entirely in Korean hands. However, we are starting to see stray and reinforcements trickle in from the south and from their two fortress cities of Yokohama, apparently Chichijima, and Mililani, Macau, quite possibly Ioto, better known as Iwo Jima. Korea could theoretically at least take out many of these reinforcements while they're still embarked, but appear to be focusing on attacking the ROJ from the sea, and so it is possible that this kangaroo backdoor squad, up there with XKCD's Slide Mountain Ocean in terms of words, that surely can't all refer to the same thing, could succeed in its purpose. Mongolia has swapped Barnaul for Shenzhen. Sibir, however, is still slowly gaining the advantage despite a few precious giant death robots, and is that a great artist I see? Sibir are getting more and more biotroopers to the front, and eastern Mongolia is looking fairly empty. Oh, and I'm not completely caught up on all these future world units, but it appears that Mongolia has very few melee units in stark comparison to Sibir's biotrooper bias. Iceland has captured Panormus, but Carthage is looking vulnerable despite the Brazilian peacekeepers. The Borg have 2 air bases in North Africa, and neither is at risk of flipping anytime soon. Despite the talk of Boer remilitarization, they still appear to have far more workers than they do actual military units, but that is probably not quite bad enough for Iceland to make any more headway, as they have a minimal to non-existent land presence in Africa. Tharapne falls. Brazil's worryingly ranged heavy collection of troops previously seen in Mexico have evaporated, and Pedro, perhaps after a last-minute intervention by Mini Pedro, has replaced them with the tried and tested paratrooper and XCOM combo. The Inuit convoy from earlier does not appear to have moved. Strangely enough, for a superpower to superpower war, what happens next seems to rely mostly on a third party. namely the Blackfoot, who have their own paratrooper carpet. Can anyone detect a hint of notice me, senpai, about Crowfoot in relation to Pedro? Stop with this weeb shit! And has surrounded Ujmal. If the carpet moves, Ujmal will likely fall. If not, it can't. Also, how on cylinder did the Mongolian tank get there? Fleeing Sibir sounds fair enough, but fleeing Sibir to A, the ocean, B, the other side of the world, and C, a war zone doesn't seem like the most sensible plan of action to me. Good news for Korea fans, Sejong has finally started to produce units in his core, with biotroopers seemingly the order of the day. Also, he has managed to hold all 4 of the cities he has taken from Park so far. Good news for Straya fans, the rest of the ROJ is looking harder to invade as the Blackfoot units have seemingly mostly gone and been replaced with green and gold melee troops. Also, the Ryukian cities are looking very vulnerable at the moment. Amusingly, although the Boers have devoted 16 planes and at least 1 missile to taking the unimportant Icelandic possession of Djarnjin, they haven't managed it. What's more, even if they do flip it, somehow I see no melee units unless I'm misreading Future Worlds again, Iceland will likely take it right back again with a giant death robot. Alright, Kuchum definitely has the upper hand here now. Barnaul has flipped back to him and Shenzhen has held. Now all that remains is for him to make a few more biotroopers and banish the Mongolians' outdated drone and hover tank carpet to oblivion. Now, don't get me wrong, I kind of want Mongolia to win this, but I don't believe for a second that they actually will. Ciudad del Carmen is orange again. What is more worrying for Inglefer is that Brazil no longer blocks the Strait of Gibraltar, although the absence of a proper Boer navy should be some consolation. Plus, at least this far west, the Icelanders still have a clear advantage in terms of air power, as can be seen with the health of Boer cities compared to Icelandic ones. Well, this isn't very encouraging. Olympia and Epidaurus have fallen, and the Boers seem to have found a way of threatening Europe without having any ships, namely embarked units and shoddy air AI. Also, for the first time in God knows how long, the Boers have more military units on a slide than they do workers. Kuchum has flipped this front firmly in his favor, as he has started to push east instead of trying to reclaim lost cities. I know I'm sounding like a stuck record with these Kuchum Genghis slides, but there's not that much to say about it, other than that Kuchum is winning. I guess you could say that. Oh, and the Mongolian great artist thinks life would be better in Sibir, oddly enough. Kyoto falls to Korea. The city is divided between those who celebrate hard and recreate the Jeon festival after however many millennia of enforced Australian cultural observance, and those who assume it's going to flip right back and so flee to Korea proper. Tion Denis has returned to Parks, who thinks that the best way of defending Shikoku is by making sure the eastern half of the island is adequately protected with settlers, and both Tokyo and Gladstone appear to be decreasing in population, presumably because the warships are nicking all the sushi. Or in Tokyo's case, Australian fusion sushi, possibly in a sense of nuclear fusion, given that it is the CBR. Remember that comment by, I've forgotten who it was, that said that Australia would magic a carpet out of nowhere at some point? Well, here it is. Perhaps not the best carpet I've seen in recent episodes, but it is a carpet nonetheless, a relief to Straya fans and a further confusion for the power rankers, who can't seem to be able to decide whether Park should be ranked 3rd or 8th or somewhere in between. I have no idea what happened to the manufactory, but what is apparent is that Korea has launched a half-hearted attack on Mwawanjum, apparently with a non-nuclear missile, as I can't see any fallout. Also, the ship that is likely responsible, is that a cyber sub? Appears to be single-handedly blocking 2 former Kimberley cities. Go figure. Is it just really scary looking or something like that? Is it broadcasting Gangnam Style at 200 decibels in order to prevent anyone from going anywhere near it? Will we ever know? The Blackfoot haven't moved, and so Ujmal is still blue, although it does have 0 health. The Brazilians have also launched a rather half-hearted attack on Laredo, which, incidentally, is somehow over 5 times as large as Guadalajara, despite the city flips. I know puppeted cities tend to favor gold, but this is so gold-focused as to be absurd. I'm sure there's a neoliberalism joke around here somewhere, but I can't think of it right now. And besides, they're all autocrats in the CBR anyway. Moving on to the war for North American relevance, the Blackfoot and Bucks are still struggling to make headway, although the burnt-out shell of Maracaibo is currently under Blackfoot control, and they are slowly landing more paratroopers on the Yucatan. I still can't imagine much arising from this war, other than that someone else declaring war on the combatants. The Blackfoot could hold Maracaibo if they really stuck to it, and if they did, they would threaten Palenque, but terrain heading from there towards Port-au-Prince is just too hostile. Oh, well, our first shot of turn 242 sees Uxmal go green. I'm not sure what exactly happened. Presumably Crowfoot moved a paratrooper closer to the Bucks and so cleared a gap for a Brazilian paratrooper to take the city, thus forcing the rest of the Blackfoot paras out of Brazilian territory. Although the Inuit fleet seems to be frozen off the coast of Baja California, note that Ekanik has air superiority here. Pedro has a significant number of planes in the island city of Tulum, which helped with the Tharapne and presumably with Uxmal, but they are now out of range, and the last two Inuit cities south of the Blackfoot core now serve as air bases. Having said that, Brazil could most likely safely move some planes to Tharapne, as there are no Inuit paratroopers or XCOMs for miles around. The Bucks have taken back Maracaibo and removed the Blackfoot paratroopers from the peninsula. It's looking bare enough for Crowfoot to stage a comeback, but he should be wary of the Bucks' giant death robots, presumably still flying a skull and crossbones, or skull and cross metallic limbs or wrenches or something. Iceland has somehow come through and sniped Basseterre Amer, but it doesn't look like it will hold, as it is entirely surrounded by Boer units. Icelandic and Boer cities alike find themselves bombed to zero health, making the waters of the Mediterranean run with, well, if not blood, jet fuel in the process. Oh, and the Boers seem to have flipped Sparta. What is more worrying for Inglefur is that there is now an opening for a Boer unit to take Carthage. I don't see it holding much longer. Southern Japan is, at least in terms of population, a shell of its former self, as cities suffer flip after flip after flip, and people flee en masse to Korea, hoping that Sejong won't copy the Svirland Japanese government and only let in something like 2.5 refugees per year. Although there are fewer Aussie reinforcements on boats now than there were a few turns ago, the ROJ is looking more and more fortified, and although Sejong could still claim the archipelago with another push, that shot of Parks' core means he should be at least a little worried. Our first look at Inuit Murka for quite a while shows a region which, while barer than it could be, is still not quite as bare as the Boer core. Interestingly, Blackfoot overflow seems to be more of a problem than Brazilian overflow, except around Buccaneer Petit Goave, much to Crowfoot's irritation. Here we have the Inuit core proper. It tells a similar story to the southern shot, with Blackfoot present in most areas, although not quite enough to do what Brazil did to Sweden if Crowfoot and Ekanik went to war. Interestingly, Ekanik seems to be suffering from Kruger worker overload syndrome, although at least in this case they tend to share tiles with actual military units. Oh, and the Inuit are the new host of the World Congress after a random selection between them, the Blackfoot, and Australia. I'm not sure how useful that will be to them, though. A ragtag coalition of semi-rump states and non-existent states bans perfume. God knows why exactly, although it annoys the superpowers, so it must be good. I can't see any particular things to note in this Vietnam shot other than the Trung starting to unpuppet Kimbernesia. Antium has flipped, Panoramas has changed hands, and Sparta is fairly firmly orange once again. The Boers are back in Europe. Damn it. Not much else to report here other than that the Boers starting to get a proper navy into the Mediterranean from the east, possibly by utilizing the Devon Canal. Oh, and Brazil has annexed Constantinople, so that's cool. Carthage falls to the Borg. Ah well. I just tell myself that it was a miracle that Inglefur managed to hold on to it for so long anyway. The tide has truly turned in favor of the Borg. At this rate, despite the constant bombing of North Africa, the only thing that will save the Icelandic Italy is... bad news for Boer supporters, good news for actual human beings everywhere. In other words, freaking bonsai, people. Pedro, who has built up a carpet both on land and in the air in West Africa, has declared war on Kruger, hopefully bringing a trail of cyber death and putrid green destruction in his wake. Kumbai Saleh has already fallen, and Lichtenberg and Azura also look vulnerable. Could this be the war to end all Boers, or am I just being hopeful? The war kicks off in North Africa. I count 6 Brazilian gains in this screenshot alone, including Iridium, which presumably flipped from gray to orange to green in one turn. Although the Boers have a respectable force in this area, Brazil still heavily outnumber them. Perhaps Ingolfer will have the last laugh here after all, not directly, but by providing space for Brazil to harbor paratroopers before they descend into Boer lands. Ainai and Epidaurus fall, with Sparta and Varna set to follow. Brazil, like Iceland before them, has air superiority even on this front. A larger push by Brazil could probably secure control over the former Divinish Empire territory, and from there the entirety of the Arabian Peninsula. Remember when the Boers were confined to territory south and west of Divin? Those were the days. Incidentally, I've forgotten, has Brazil's intervention meant that Iridium has yet another new owner? Or has Brazil owned it before? Remember that this is the first turn of the war, and yet Pedro has made concrete advances on every front. Not only has Brazil increased the size of Oman by seizing Nazran and parachuting XCOMs all over the Arabian Peninsula, but Pedro has also secured Persepolis and Passagarde, pushing the front line back to where people thought the Boer-Vietnam front would stabilize. One slightly concerning development for Pedro fans in Brazil is that the fact that there are no paratroopers or XCOMs on this slide east of Ngomba. Best keep an eye out on that one. Wow, yeah, that's what I like seeing. The Blackfoot could likely take the entirety of the Hawaiian archipelago if they struck Parks now, although whether they could hold it after reinforcements arrived is another matter altogether. The Aussies seem to have more of a localized big carrier lobbyist problem than the Blackfoot do. I wonder what happened to Kaloa Kano. Presumably something to do with Korea, perhaps the same thing that happened to that city in Western Straya a few slides ago. A golden age arrives for the sub. Presumably it's not to do with my narration, so I'll just assume it's to do with all the various civs kicked out by Kruger celebrating his demise. Surprisingly, there's not much to see here other than perhaps the seriously lost Strayan biotrooper. Brazil has inched its carpet to the right a bit and parachuted some XCOMs into Boer territory, and a few Boer cities on the front have either gone from undamaged to damage or from damage to 0 health. But I expected city flips here, and city flips there are none. Perhaps next turn. Brazil cleans up some Bordigor in North Africa by adding Utique and airbase Cathargo Nova to its empire. The Borg, while pumping out biotroopers, is perhaps not pumping them out quite quickly enough, although of course we don't know how fast the Brazilian carpet is reinforcing either. There is also a nasty looking collection of biotroopers between 3 newly greened cities near the coast, which could cause a significant, if temporary, headache for Pedro's army in that area. Epidaurus is the first city to be retaken by the Borg in this war, although it does come at the cost of being kicked out of mainland Europe once again by the Brazilians taking Sparta. Brazil looks set to take Varna and reclaim Epidaurus any turn now. Brazil claims the twin Boer powerhouses of Vung Tau and Baghdad, despite Boer biotroopers trickling in and reclaiming Nazran, and it appears flipping Bayululu. As ever, Brazil could take just as much land again if they were surgical with their paratrooper strikes, but whether they actually will be or not is another matter entirely. Notice, incidentally, that Passagarde, which appeared in danger of flipping, has not done so, and if anything, looks more firmly Brazilian. Our last shot of the war in Japan for this part reveals neither side being able to make much progress. The minimap appears to show Nagoya being back in Australian hands, and Tokyo and Wakayama are surrounded by Aussie biotroopers. On the other hand, Osaka is even more firmly Korean and has not suffered the effects of a siege, meaning it is bigger than the largest of the ROJ's shrinking cities. Kyoto appears to be likely to stay in the DPRJ, albeit probably after one extra flip from the half-health biotrooper. but Korea doesn't have the navy anymore to exert its power further afield. At this point, it's mostly carriers remaining, although kamikaze carriers probably wouldn't be a bad move at this point, as they would likely be replaced by something that's not a carrier. Mongolia actually made progress. I've spent most of this part saying they're doomed, but they just took a city which was Siberian at the start of the war with a giant death robot. Shaoshan, too, has flipped back to Mongolia, although neither city seems like it will hold out. The big question raised by this slide, however, is why isn't Brazil moving that carpet south? The penultimate slide of this episode reveals Lichtenberg and Tarentum have fallen to Pedro's amazing Technicolor paratroopers, with Konogo and finally Kumasi set to follow. The Strayan biotrooper seems to be breeding, incidentally, and the Boers actually have a mini carpet for the first time in ages around Mampang and Atabubu. Why, Blue Cassette, why do you like ending parts of a Boer-based cliffhangers so much? Another Aussie biotrooper tourist. What's going on? Is this the start of a Brazil Blackfoot-style carpeting tactic from Parks? Is that even how those work? Seeing as the tiles that the biotroopers appear on are decidedly not those closest to Australian territory. Anyway, Brazil versus the Boers. Pedro has taken control of the entirety of Mesopotamia, reducing the once mighty 45-pop Vung Tau to little more than a village in the process through multiple flips. Oh, and in the corner of the slide, as expected, we can see that Epidaurus and Varna have gone green. Both sides have a decent number of units in this slide. We'll see what happens next time, I guess. Anyway, that, unfortunately, is the end of this part. It has, as ever, been an honor to narrate this part, and I hope I wasn't too awful at it. Jamata. And this is Dawkinzz saying that anime is now illegal. All weeaboos shall be rounded up and escorted to, Brazilian containment camps, I guess, because they're the new frontrunners. But anyway, my name is Dawkinzz, and thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe if you can, it really helps me out, and we'll see you next time.